episode 152, Birthing a Business During the Pandemic. Welcome to Gratitude Geek, the relationship marketing podcast helping DIY marketers find your micro-influencer magic so you attract raving fans and repeat buyers. I'm your host, Kandas Rodarte, and this week I'm joined by blended family expert Amy Stone. Amy is a certified life coach who helps step-parents and adults in blended families. Amy helps flustered and overwhelmed step-parents who want to reduce drama and go from chaos to calm and happiness. Hey, Amy. How you doing?
I'm doing great. So wonderful to see you today.
It is. It is. You look fabulous. It must be warm where you are.
It is. It is warm where I am, and I don't think it's warm where you are at all. I live in Miami, Florida. It's always warm here.
We're waiting for snow. It's supposed to happen today. I keep looking out the window. It hasn't happened yet, but we're waiting for it. Okay, so tell us your story. Tell us your unique story. How did you get to where you are today?
I would love to tell you this story. Once upon a time, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, a baby girl was born. Just kidding. It did happen, not in a galaxy far, far away, but in a place. But the way I got here today I'm a life coach. I coach step parents and adults in blended families, and I help them create more happiness for themselves and their family. And the way I got there was that it's partly my live story. I've been a step parent longer than I've been a parent, a big chunk of my life. And so a couple of years ago, I had a business. I was working with runners and triathletes, took a life coach certification, thinking I would apply that to helping my runners and my triathletes. It turned out that it was a very wonderful self-discovery journey. And through that, I decided, you know what? I would like to be a life coach. And then when I thought about who I could best serve, that answer turned out to be this area where I know a lot of things because I've lived this.
I love that. It's such an interesting niche, too. What are some of the things that step parents have issues with? Like what are some of the biggest issues that they come to you with?
So the biggest issues that usually show up, I will say, like, as I go into this, I'll say that for the people who are listening, who are not in a blended family and they're not step parents, they may sound familiar because there's a lot of similarity. There's not necessarily specific problems that show up, although they feel very unique and snowflakey when they're happening to you. They've never happened to anybody else. They're just happening to us. People come with what we'd call a difference in parenting styles. I'm having trouble getting along with my partner because of parenting styles, or the ex or the other parent in another house. Like, we're having a disagreement about that, right? So that's one of the problems. People fight a lot about money. In all partnerships, including families and blended families, it can be very complicated. So those are two of the things. Step parents can really struggle with concepts of discipline and parenting and feeling like an outsider in the family mix. So that's a common one too. That's one of the things that shows up.
All of which is pretty common. I mean, with the exception of the third parent in the other
Right.
household, it's very, very common themes. I mean, biological parents sometimes come to heads about parenting styles because we all came from different families. I mean,
yes,
so in the United States, we could come from completely different religions, completely different ethnic backgrounds, completely different, socioeconomic backgrounds. That's the beautiful thing about America, is that we could have, only in America could my daughter exist. I mean, honestly.
right.
Because there's nowhere else in the world where someone who has the family history of my daughter would have the family history. And so it's amazing. This is kind of an interesting, this podcast is dropping. If you're listening in the future, listener, this podcast dropped in January of 2023. And it's like the third in a series of completely non-business related podcasts.
There you go.
But I think the themes are universal. Every interviewee was a business owner. Even though they don't seem like they're business related, they are. Gratitude and relationships are across the board, important. So let's talk about when you made the transition from I want to be a life coach for runners to I want to be a life coach for step parents. What other factors informed that decision, or maybe steered you in the different direction?
Sure. I mean, this was a pandemic. The pandemic gave it a big shift. So when part of the pandemic was that all of the races for running and triathlon sort of stopped, right? That was a big shift. And that was one of the things that encouraged me to pursue the life coach training because I wanted to be able to offer more mindset work and motivation. And those were things that I read a lot about, but I was aware that I didn't actually think I knew how to coach on them. I could talk about them, but I wasn't real sure how to coach on them. That was a style of coaching because running and triathlon coaching is very much like, hey, run 1 mile today, run 2 miles tomorrow, do 10 sit-ups, right? It's very formulaic and instruction based. Life coaching is more inquisitive and it's different. And so that was definitely a piece that encourage the shift. And so that was definitely that. So that's definitely one of the things that got there that encouraged me to make that shift and make that change.
The pandemic has changed the world for a lot of people. I recently went to an event. It was a BNI networking event. It was a regional event. So there were people there from all sorts of different clubs or chapters of BNI, which is Business Network International for the listener. And I made a conscious decision in the middle of the pandemic to switch when my chapter decided to go back to in person. I decided I didn't want that for me. I wanted a completely virtual chapter. So I found a completely virtual chapter based in the Detroit area, and I live on the other side of the state from there. So most of the people in that chapter live 3 hours away from me. However, we have members from 4 different states in our chapter. It's actually really quite groovy. Anyway, I knew a lot of the people that were going to be at this mixer, but I hadn't seen them in a while, right? Because
Yeah.
I hadn't seen them in a while. And so I, started fluttering around, meeting, talking, catching up with people. And it turns out that about 5 of the people in the room got divorced in the last 2 years.
Really?
They had pandemic related divorces.
Yeah. No.
Have
Well,
you, can you dig into that? Do you know anything about this?
not, I mean, I don't know. I don't have any actual data or anything. And I have real strong opinions about divorce data because, I don't know that the data is always accurate because the data about divorces is collected by lawyers and people who have a business around divorce, right? It's not part of the census or any like actual, so the data could be right or it could be very, it's like, lies and statistics, right? And but I do know several people who got divorced like you do during the pandemic. And one of the things I like to coach people on, and one of my beliefs about like parenting and family, it is hard to live with other people. It is hard to live with that's the end of that statement. It can be very hard to live with other people. And a reality during the pandemic is that we all came home into the houses. We were in each other's space all the time. Oh, I have a funny story about that. Can I tell you my funny story about that?
Of course.
Okay, so my husband was working from home, as everybody was, right? And this is actually, he loves working from home. He thinks it's the greatest thing that's ever happened. He just is absolutely thrilled to be working in gym shorts from home, right? So the way the story goes is I was in the kitchen eating my lunch, and my husband took a phone call in the kitchen. Now he has an office in the house where he can go, close the door, take the phone call, but he was in the kitchen. I was eating my lunch and he shushed me, Candace, while I was eating my lunch while he was having the phone call. So, I'm not, a rude person. So I let him finish his phone call. And then I very quietly, gently tried to remind him that we were in the kitchen, which is not his office.
I wonder how many times that story could be retold by different people.
Right? I mean, it's hard living with, I mean, we want it to be, if we're going through the world with this like idea that there's some version of home life where we never have, friction with the people we live with, that just doesn't, that's like, that only exists in Mary Poppins, right? Maybe not even there.
Yeah.
So, it's very hard. And so my completely uneducated guess would be that when everybody came home to the small space, it really brought to light friction that was maybe already there, and there was no way to get around it. There was
Yeah.
nowhere to go.
Well, one of the stories, one of the root causes of a from the 5 people that I talked to that night was that they had vastly different political views,
Oh
and
yeah,
they couldn't reconcile them. Where you could have vastly different political views from your spouse when you don't spend all day long with each other with the TV on,
yes, and
and it
I
works
do
out fine.
know. Yeah. That's an interesting conversation. I don't have any way to weigh in. I do have a friend who got divorced because of political views recently, and I don't know whether or not we're in a sort of a unique climate. I assume it's not totally unique if you were to go back in time, but this is the only time I've ever lived. And so, it's like there's different polarities that are hard to reconcile at the moment. And so, yeah,
Okay, so women got the vote in what, 1919, 19, was
something
it
like that.
something like that?
1920.
So
Yeah.
I really love genealogy. I find it very fascinating. And so I have an ancestry.com account and I did my DNA and I just, go in there and I twiddle around in there and I don't spend hours in there. I just like, what's new today? Well, the voter registration for my great grandmother Rose Nesbitt and her husband Sam, it says Sam Nesbitt and then Rose Nesbitt underneath. They belonged to two different political parties when she first was able to register to vote. She registered as a different party than him, and that was
That,
over about 100 years. I guess women have only had the vote for 100 years. That's
that's it.
BS.
That's it.
Oh my
It
God.
is.
Oh, that's
It is. And
awful.
you know what? That means that it means like it says a lot actually about your family that, that's in there and that she decided to do that because I think at the time, well, I don't even know if this is true or like a historical nostalgia thing, but the view of history that I kind of have is that a lot of people were really kind of under the thumbs of their partners. And so the other way she could have done it right would have been to mark it and then go into the secret box and make her own secret decision. And I remember my parents when I was a kid telling me, the value of the secrecy that nobody knew what your vote was, right? And we don't talk about our vote. That was a thing that my parents would say, and it's so funny because of course, I knew what they were voting for. Like, and most people have a pretty good guess of who I'm voting for, just by knowing me. It's not oh so secret just because you're not in the box with me, you know.
I don't know. I've been surprised. I've the last 10 years or so, I've been surprised to find out who people's political affiliations were. I made assumptions and then would be shocked that I was wrong.
Yes,
Yeah.
I thought the yard signs about, let's see, we're in 2022. So the yard sign 6 to 8 years ago was very interesting. I was like, oh, really? That's how
Yeah.
you weigh in. Good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, it's just been things that I just never. But my parents, I don't know if they always voted the same because they didn't talk about it. I mean, I do know that my father's political views changed dramatically when they moved to Texas because he's from San Francisco, born and raised in San Francisco, and then
Okay.
he was military, and he was very very conservative in politically. I was when I was growing up, he was very conservative, and then he moved to Texas and he realized that he wasn't as conservative as he thought he
As
was.
you thought he was. So a conservative in San Francisco is not the same as a
Yeah.
conservative in Texas.
Yeah, so he,
Yeah.
he actually switched parties when
Wow.
he moved to Texas. It was pretty amazing. Yeah, and now when you have a conversation with him today, it's like, Dad, who are you? What happened to the man that was my dad when I was a teenager? you know?
Right. And I think that some of the things change as we age, right? So I definitely had different views and saw the world differently when I was younger. And I have a college age. I've got two stepkids and two kids, and I've got one in college. And the one that's in college is, has a very different view of the world that I'm pretty sure it will morph as she gets more responsibility and more assets and the things that happen to us.
Yeah, yeah. But I have confidence in that age. My daughter's in grad school right now, and I have a lot of confidence that her generation is going to do amazing things for our country. I, and
Oh, me too.
yeah,
Um, I have a teenager who knew more about the war in Ukraine than I did from TikTok, and his information was spot on. It was amazing.
yeah. Wow. Speaking of the war in Ukraine, I haven't listened to the whole thing yet, but it's a very interesting interview. There's a guy named Lindy Beige who does archaeology type YouTube videos. I think he's an archaeologist by trade, and it's Lindy Beige is his website. Yeah, you have to say it just like that too, Lindy Beige. Anyway, 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 he interviewed a British man who went over to Ukraine as it's not a mercenary, they call him something else, but as a soldier. He went to fight the war for Ukraine as a independent soldier. Um, and then so they had the interview before he left, and then the interview when he came back, and it's just really really interesting because that war is not being fought the way that we imagine wars to be fought. You know, it's
Yep.
they don't have air support. So
Have
it's
you did you watch the Dave Chappelle Saturday Night Live opening recently?
I think I did, but tell us what he said.
He just part of his bit was that he talked about how surprising it was at the beginning that the residents of Ukraine were so phenomenally successful in their very grassroots individualist effort. And his punchline is that it's like the US, being in a war with a single state and losing, right? And I'm mangling it because I'm not Dave Chappelle. I don't do as good a job delivering the punchline. But it was really, I mean, it was such an interesting thing to watch from so far away, and see it transpire and really, really, really foundationally like changing the way we think about it.
So the Ukrainian people have had 90 years or so of bitterness to build up to this resistance. So about 90 years ago, Russia invaded Ukraine, took it over, and then starved the people of Ukraine. And they did not forget. Ukrainians did not forget.
No.
And I think that is what is driving this.
And could be, and that history, being educated on that history has been a learning curve for me, which this is not a flattering story of me, but when the spelling of the word Kiev was changing, and I was thinking to myself, have I not been paying attention? Have I been misspelling this word my whole life? Like, what is going on? And then it's been like a very speedy learning, like updating. I've learned a lot about the history of the country that I just did not know, just was not really focused on or paying attention to. And that does sometimes make me feel like I'm not doing, the best job being a global citizen. But on the other hand, there's a lot of stuff to pay attention to.
It's Kiev, right?
Kiev.
Chicken
I'm
Kiev.
not sure.
Chicken Kiev, but I think they say Kiev now. But yeah, no, it's
I'm
not
not
a very
sure.
flattering thing for me either because I don't really want to watch the news. I don't want to watch what's going on. I don't want to,
Right.
but I want to know. Like I want to know what's going on, but I don't want to know what's going on to these little details. But I want to, I want to. I'm just waiting
Yeah.
for.
There's a line. There's a
Yeah.
line. There's like to
Yeah.
know what's going on, but then to not let it. We know now. So this is one of the curses of being alive today. I love being alive today. I think that being alive today is wonderful, and I'm all for it. But back in so I turned 50 next year, and so back in the 80s, right? You only got news twice a day, right? That was it, and you had to take the action to like pick up the newspaper or turn on the TV, and it was curated by those editorial boards. They were creating one product a day. And then whenever it happened, the magic of 24-hour news cycle and then the internet, now it's like a fire hose of information and news. So it's like we're doing it the opposite. It's like we have to curate how often we take it in. Because it can get to the point where you kind of have to remind yourself, it's like, okay, I can't actually do anything today about the situation in Ukraine and Russia because I may have forgotten, but I'm actually not the president of the United States or the
The
president of
UN
Russia.
or NATO.
Right,
or,
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Nobody's actually asking me what should
Yeah.
happen. Like I can have opinions and I can take in information, but I can't actually nobody's actually saying, hey, what should we do today, Amy? Because I would be
Exactly.
happy to tell them.
Yeah. Well, if we ran the world, it would be a much different place than it is today, right?
It would. Do you ever think that to yourself? Do you think if I was in charge today?
Oh, my husband is famous for saying that if I was in charge, if you were in charge, like saying it to me, because apparently I voice my opinion a lot
Right.
to him. To him.
I get it. I get it.
I think that the news, and I don't want to, I guess there is no flattering way to say this. I think the news manufactures stuff just to have something to talk about. Because 24-hour
I think
news
they
is
almost
hard.
have to.
It's hard. Like,
Yeah.
I honestly, the former president of the United States probably would not have been elected president of the United States if the news hadn't have given him so much coverage.
Could be. I mean, like it really, really could be. I really do think that it changed everything. Like, so you have all of this news that's going on, and it used to be, hey, what things will we choose to put in this one piece of paper, this newspaper, or this one 30-minute segment, right? And now it was 24 hours to fill up. And so, I mean, think about all the dumb stuff you have seen. It's sitting in the airport, which is the only place I ever watched headline news, right? Think about all the dumb crap that you would sometimes see there. It's like, oh, Snowflake, the turtle in, this town is doing this thing. They needed stuff to put in there. And that meant that sometimes I think things went faster. I don't think it was as selective. And so I live in Florida where we have hurricanes. Holy moly. When the hurricane is like off the coast of Africa, they're already talking to us about it. It's weeks away from anything I'm ever going to pay attention to. I'm like, that's a cloud. That's a cloud in the ocean. Why are you telling me? Like I don't care yet.
I can't tell you how much of weight has been lifted off of me these last 5 years that I don't have to worry about hurricanes anymore.
Right.
Because at least when we lived in Texas, at least once a year, I had to worry about whether or not my house was going to flood.
Yeah.
And it never did. But man, sometimes it came close. There are times that there is minnows in my front porch. Like I literally opened my front door, looked down, and there's minnows right there out my front door. So how do they get there so quickly is what I want to know. I mean, how do fish get in the floodwaters so quickly? It's just crazy. And where did they come from? Like they would have had the closest place that would have had fish was a creek that was probably 4 blocks away. So those minnows came from 4 blocks away. Isn't that crazy?
And then they were on
and it
your
was a
front porch.
creek.
That
It
is
was
crazy.
a creek,
Yeah.
too. Just crazy.
Yep.
And when I say minnows, I mean a lot of fish. A lot, not a few.
Yeah.
A school of little fish in the floodwaters right outside my front door. It's crazy. So I'm really glad I don't have to worry about that anymore.
That's good.
Anybody who says, well, now you have to worry about snow, the snow is kind of fun.
Good.
It's pretty and it's fun, and I never have to worry about my house flooding ever. All right, let's talk about, okay, so you had a pandemic business. You launched your business during the pandemic. What challenges did you have getting going, and what was easy?
So this is a perfect time to ask this question because people are gonna listen to this as early as January, but this is the end of the year, so I'm doing a lot of thinking. I did not say that word. That word got tangled in my mouth. Thinking. I did a lot of thinking.
Your Southern just came out. People forget
I don't
that
have
Florida's
it.
in the South.
Right. I'm further south than that. I'm so far south I have to go north to get to the deep South. But let's go with that. So I've been doing a lot of thinking about this past year and what I've gotten done and what I haven't, what worked and what didn't, and all the businessy things that we do. What I want to, with the premise that I want to do better next year, right? And one of the great things about the pandemic that is so obvious now, but it was real organic the way it happened, is that I was able to, because I was on Zoom for everything, I was meeting people all over the world from my bedroom, right? And that's such a great thing. And I think about that now because now local stuff is opening back up. And that's wonderful and fantastic. But you noticed all of a sudden, hey, you guys are all my neighbors. Like you're not talking to somebody, like you're in Michigan and I'm in Florida. And so that was a really, really great thing. And that was wonderful. And I totally took it for granted. I'm going to be really upfront. I took it for granted. I learned how to network and make connections during the pandemic. All of my other businesses were very sort of transactional. And so I learned how to, do this business relationship connecting type stuff. Gosh, what a gift that is. So nice. So nice. And I think that there's a lot of advantages to that are on this virtual world that we had during the pandemic. Challenges for the business. I don't know. I mean, there were probably some pandemic related challenges that I'm not thinking of. The biggest challenge, this is the first business I've had where I'm creating what I'm doing. Like I'm not selling something that somebody else has made or a framework that somebody else had. I really had to spend a lot of time figuring out what my positions were and thinking about what my opinions were and figuring out what I was doing. I'll tell you, if you want to disrupt your family and really have a spicy meal, tell your partner that what you want to do is start a business where you're going to talk about your family.
I kind of do that. I have a podcast.
Right. At one point I went to my husband. I said, hey, listen, I got this idea. And, I'm an idea person. We've been married a long time. My husband's heard lots of things that I want to do and he's supportive and all the things. But I was like, I'm going to, be a life coach and I'm going to talk about step parenting in our family. And he was like, okay. Now what does that mean? Like, what is that? Are you gonna, are you gonna air the dirty laundry? Are you gonna tell everybody all the, like, so, and so we had to have some conversations about that.
Did you set boundaries? Did you say, okay, these are things I won't talk about?
So it took a while to figure out, right, what I was going to do, which I'm real honest about. And yeah, we definitely, and it also took a long time and I'm sure you've done a version of this yourself. There is like, you have to think about how you're going to present very public stories, right? And I think we've all heard the very public stories that are super, super intense and super, super private. Sometimes they're needed to be told and sometimes they're not. And so figuring out where my line for that was more where the work was. And then when I came to my husband with, this is what I think I'm going to do here, he was very comfortable with that. So I'm very careful that I talk a lot about me and my story as a stepmom, and I'm very respectful that when that crosses over into other people's stories in my family, I try real hard not to tell other people's stories because that's theirs, right? That's
Yeah.
theirs.
I think I had the same situation with breast cancer, with, talking about breast cancer, because
Right.
I started documenting my journey with video from like at the very beginning. And I didn't realize that hundreds of thousands of people would see the videos. I didn't know that. I just was sharing my stories, and
Right.
then the videos got shared. But yeah, because it's, you don't know how much of that is, when I was doing it, I didn't know how much of it was going to affect my family. And it could, because it was a
Right.
selfish thing for me. So yeah, I kind of wish that I had discussed it more than just I just pressed the play button, right, and started talking. I wish I'd put a little more thought into it before I did it. But after sitting on a table with your boobs hanging out and people writing with markers on them, and pushing them around and touching, and six people in the room touching you in different places, you kind of, you know you can't. What else do I have to hide?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was in a room and this many people, and there was a camera and an X-ray machine, and there was people behind a window, and everybody could see me naked, right?
Yeah.
What else do I have to hide?
No, absolutely. And there's definitely empowerment in sharing our stories, but it's a process, right? So because sometimes when we're sharing the story, we're just, it's just word vomit of our feelings, right? And the one of the risks, right? That it's not risk is the wrong word, but one of the realities of sharing in a social format is that once it's out there, people will respond and share their feedback, and they don't always agree with us, right?
Hmm.
So, and that's the reality of being online. But I mean, and I have not been through breast cancer, but it's helpful to people who end up in the same situation to have had that information. When not at all comparison, but right before before I delivered my daughter, one of my girlfriends called me and is like, "Hey, listen, you need to know the following things before you go in there about this experience," right? And it was like, the temporary underwear and all the gore and the muck and stuff like that. And I remember being in there, and there's like, why are there so many people in the room with you when you're like naked going through this deeply personal experience? And then in the middle of it, somebody's like, "Hey, do you mind if we have a student in the room?" And I was like, "What are you doing? There's like 100, okay, I don't know. Like, does anybody else want to come watch me like deliver this baby?"
I had six students in the room when I was having my ultrasound.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard.
There were,
That's hard.
yeah, I had a wand in a place that nobody should see
You
but your
don't want
husband.
one.
And
Right.
there were six students in the room watching the wand and the monitor. Yeah, it's very uncomfortable and awkward.
Right. It's this like weird combination of
Really,
like,
honestly, is there six students in the room when a man has a prostate exam? Does that ever happen?
I don't know. I like maybe like, but it's like simultaneously this like deeply emotional, personal moment. And also it's like bizarrely public and on display. And they give you a choice, but it is one of those moments where, is it really a choice? Like, could I have said, "Hey, no students," like at that moment? Like, I don't know. I mean, I didn't, it's like, I was in the middle of doing something else.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sure there have been women who said no. But
and I have more
honestly,
power to them.
so I'm just a little bit older than you. And your oldest is the same, probably the same, a little bit younger than my child. So, we were having babies, and they're out around the same decade. But I don't know about your parents, but my mom, they gave her the twilight drug to have babies. So she didn't remember the experience at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. So my mom was kind of a hippie, so she was all natural, I think, although I don't really know that story. And but my mother-in-law tells the story that she was awake for all of the work. And then however many hours of active labor. And then they gave her the twilight drug and she was conked out and woke up in a room. I'm laughing because this is so horrible. Woke up in a room by herself with no baby and
That
no
ha-
memory of what happened.
that happened to me.
Ah,
I woke up and there was no baby, and
really?
I was like, I expressly said, I do not want my child taken away from me, and they took her away from me anyway.
Yeah. No,
And I
yeah.
went on the call button. And I was like, "Where's my child?" Because
Yeah.
and my husband had gone.
Right.
My husband had gone home because he was exhausted. I was in labor for 26 hours, so he was exhausted, right? So he went home to go to sleep because he didn't want to sleep in a chair. And I trusted the nurses to go by my wishes, to accept my wishes, and not take my child away from me. And they took her away. And I'm like, why did you do that? I would have woken up. We wanted you to sleep.
Right.
I don't care.
Right.
I wanted her here with me, but whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they always think they know best. I think I hope that experience has changed in the last 25 years. Yeah,
I do too.
yeah. But I think, I mean, if they aren't doing twilight drugs anymore, then maybe they aren't taking babies away from mommies in the in post.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I'm trying like mine. So yeah, so my kids were around, but there's a lot. Like I had a definitely very Western medical, labor experiences, which is what it is. But and I didn't know any different. There was a lot of like they would give me a nodding of a yes, like, oh, sure, we'll do that for you. And then what happened was completely different. Like, so sure, we'll let the baby stay with you. And then the baby's not, in the same room. I'm like, where's the baby? Oh, the baby's in the nursery so you can sleep. Didn't we talk about this? Didn't we talk about this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so this conversation has been all over the
This
place,
conversation went all over the place.
but it's fun. You know what? These are the best kinds of conversations. I was just chatting with somebody a couple days ago, another podcast interview. And I told him after the show was over, I said, this is my favorite kind of interview because I get to talk about interesting topics with people I don't know about interesting things.
Yeah.
You and we've met before, but I had never met him before. So it was very, very, this feels like, to me, this conversation feels like two women who know each other a little bit, getting to know each other a little bit better. Right.
I think that is what it feels like. I agree with that.
And I like it. Okay. So let's get back to your business. So you decide you're going to launch this business during the pandemic.
That's
Networking is the thing that you're going to do. And I have to add to what you said. I networked in person before the pandemic, and I feel like my networking skills have gotten so much better post-pandemic, and that I'm developing better referral partnerships with the people that I network with than I did before. And I don't know if that's just me or if it's just everybody's more open to it. But
Yeah.
because I grew my network outside of my little city, right?
Yeah.
I live in a town of 40,000. I just moved here 5 years ago, so I don't have a huge network here. And then I decided to do online networking, so I really still don't have a huge network here. But my network outside of the little town I live in is ginormous. Like I could literally, if you asked me for an attorney in Southern California, I bet you I can find you one.
Which is good. Yeah, it's exciting. I don't want to put a qualifier on it, but it's fun. It's
It
really,
is.
really fun. I think it's fun, and I can't do a pre and post comparison because I started in the middle of it. But I really I do enjoy it.
So okay,
Was there a question in there?
there was a
Did I
question.
miss
There was a
it?
question, but I went down a tangent. So the question is,
Okay.
because you launched during the pandemic, what marketing tools, tips, and techniques did you use? Aside from networking, did you find the most valuable?
So I really have been because I have been working on my messaging and so on and so forth. My primary focus this past year has been making connections and practicing talking to people about it, which is a part of refining that messaging, right? So, and then I also, I'm a believer in SEO, like I think SEO works. So creating that like content heavy content that will, I use that's double content, but creating that very heavy content, long form content that will feed the search engines in the future has been something I've been working on, figuring out what the words. It takes work to figure out what are the questions people are asking. And in the coaching space, I don't know if you've ever heard this in the coaching space, people say, we are our own first client a lot of the time, right? So like I was a new stepmom, I helped new stepmoms. And so it's thinking about what it was 20 years ago when this was new for me. But the struggle for me there is that I was not paying attention to that then with the idea that I was going to run a business later. So when I think back and I'm like, so what questions did I have? I'm like, I don't know, I'm not entirely sure. So, so that's an action, that's a research process. So organic, right? That's how we classify SEO organic. Doing, playing a little bit of the games of social media and being on there. The jury is still out for me as to whether or not like that actually has any benefit for me, but I like it. So I do some of it. And then, the referrals, getting to know people and learning. Oh, this is one. Learning to actually ask people to be my client, like, which is to really, really be simplified, like reviewing that thing that when you're going to sell things to people, you have to actually at some point ask them to buy something, right? So learning that skill and then putting it into practice.
Okay, so true story. Sometimes you ask in the wrong way, and this is me telling on myself. I do this thing called speed networking where it's about a 90-minute set of time on Zoom, and you get 6 minutes. Is that how we met in speed networking?
No, we met
No.
through the podcast mixer.
Okay. Oh, I love that mixer. Okay, so
Yeah.
so it's 6 minutes. The first 3 minutes, one person talks. The second 3 minutes, the other person talks, and you have 6 minutes to get to know each other, right? And it's 90 minutes, but most people leave it about an hour. And I normally leave it about the hour mark because that's a long time to talk to people that you don't know, for about because you in speed networking you don't know who you're going to get paired with, right? You just randomly
Right.
get put into a room. So I usually leave around the hour mark, but I had time that day and I decided to stay for the whole 90 minutes. So the very last person I was paired with, we get into our little breakout room, our little Zoom breakout room, and she goes, "Oh my God, Candace, I can't believe I got paired with you. I've been following you for years. I'm so excited to finally meet you." And then she's just gushing over me, and she goes, I don't know why I've never reached out before, but I follow you. I get your emails, and I'm just so excited to hire you to talk to you. And I went, "Well, you could hire me to be your coach." I just said it. It just came out my mouth like so tacky. I said, "Well, you can hire me to be your coach."
Yep.
It's just so
I'm available
tacky.
for hire. Did you know this? I am for sale.
Yeah, I do. I do have this thing like it's called coaching that I offer people
Right.
who follow me. It was so tacky, but I was a little bit flattered, and then a little bit why if she's been following me for this long and I've never met her before. What am I doing wrong that she's never reached out and said, "Hey, I want to do a 15-minute discovery call with you," or
Right.
what am I doing wrong that she's been following me for that long and she was that excited to meet me, and
Right. That she had not like started a conversation in some way,
yeah,
whether it was,
or ever
reply back to the email.
came to any of my live events because I do weekly free
Right.
live events and she's never been to any of those, but she was so excited to meet me. So, yeah, that was me being tacky.
But let's go with direct. You were just
Yeah.
being direct. By the
Yes.
way, did you
Yeah.
know
Yeah. Yeah. But that is something a lot of women especially have this issue where they have trouble asking for the sale. And honestly,
Yes.
I do too. That I cannot believe how many people just say, "Candace, you're so good at sales. I'm not as good at sales as you are." And I'm like, I never ask for the sale.
You're like, thank you. What
Thank
am
you.
I doing?
I don't know if that's true or not, but okay.
I'm going to accept this compliment that I may not believe myself.
Except for the time that I tackily said, "Well, you can hire me to be your coach," is someone I just met 30 seconds ago.
But I think it's good. I think that maybe it's not your ideal thing, but hopefully she was not like But
No,
I
we
once
had
got a
a great
challenge.
conversation. Go ahead.
Okay, good. I had a challenge from a coach that was like just to practice asking for things. And it was to lead up for asking for the sale, but just to practice asking, because I think that we are conditioned through our lives, many of us, not all of us, but many of us, out of that habit that like, and gifts, special service. My mom, like she used to tell us, I had these wacky ideas about gifts that came from my mom because she used to say, if somebody knows you well enough, they should just know what you want as a gift. So you should never have to ask for it. Right. So then I got married to this person who does not actually read my mind. Shockingly, does not read my mind. And I wouldn't ask for the things I wanted. And the direct result was I got the weirdest stuff as gifts. Right. And not at like, and so that I don't know if you've ever done this, but I went through this phase where I was like dropping hints, that he was not getting. He's a very direct person. And then one day I was like, oh, you know what? This is what would make a great gift for me. And then and that's what I got. I was like, oh my gosh, look at this magic.
Isn't that amazing?
It
If you ask for
is.
something, and I need to clarify that I am great at asking for what I want, except for the sale.
Right.
Like
I think
I
that,
don't,
yeah.
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 But there's different ways of closing. I'm not saying I'm not successful at closing. I'm just saying that I never just say, "Hey, you want to buy what I got?" You know,
Right.
I'm more subtle than that. So there's a problem or a challenge with people guessing what it is that you want as a gift, because let's say you like chickens or
Yeah.
roosters, and people know you like chickens, and so all of a sudden, all you ever get for a gift is
All you
chicken
get.
related, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not saying that I don't like Star Wars, but I get a lot of
Oh.
Star Wars related gifts.
No, that is definitely true. And it's well appreciated. It's well appreciated, but that is definitely true. It's a very good point.
So I have a story about asking for what you want. I am involved in a network marketing company, and there was a promotion going on with the company where you could rank advanced immediately if you hit a certain threshold. And I knew I was going to hit that threshold on a certain day. And I just happened to be, I was going through chemo, and I had chemo that day. And I sent a text message to the vice president of the company and said, Steve, I'm going to become an executive today. And oh, by the way, I'm at chemo right now. And then by the time I was done with chemo, I'd hit the threshold, right? Because I knew it was, I knew I had set it up so that it
Right.
would happen. I know I didn't plan for it to happen while I was in the chemo chair. It just, I'd set it up. So Steve, like 6 or 9 months later, he's writing a keynote, and he goes, I'm writing a keynote about that text message conversation that we had. And he basically wrote his keynote speech around that story. And then he called me up
Wow.
at this, he called me up on stage. And I had written on an IM card, like I written an IM statement that said, I am speaking at convention. And we were at convention. And I had written this IM card years before. I am speaking at convention. So he calls me up on stage. People are clapping for me. I mean, everybody knew the story. And I said, hand me the microphone. And he didn't hear me at first. And I said, Steve, give me the microphone. He's like, you want the microphone? I said, yes, give me the microphone. So he hands me the microphone. And and people are clapping. And I said, 3 years ago, I attended an event like this, and I wrote an IM statement that said, I am speaking at convention. And the whole audience stood up and was like cheering and clapping. There's 4,000 people in the room or something. And it's like, ask and ye shall receive. If I hadn't have
Yes.
said, hand me the microphone, I wouldn't have made that thing come true. And I gave like a 2-minute speech and walked off, and
That's
I had
true.
accomplished the thing that I wanted to accomplish, was speaking on that stage in front of those people. It wasn't the way I wanted it to happen, but I accomplished a goal, a
Right.
life goal for myself. So if I hadn't have said, give me the microphone, it wouldn't have happened. I would have
Right.
just been
No,
escorted off the
God,
stage.
that is such a good story. And it highlights one of the things that it's like you gave yourself credit, even though it didn't look exactly the way you expected it to, which I love it when stuff like that happens. And also it's kind of sneaky sometimes because you're looking for one very specific formula. So if you're not paying attention, you don't realize that you got what you asked for. And
Well, if you're not
yeah.
specific enough, you're going to get a
Right, that's
version
the
of
other
what you
thing.
asked for. And all it said was, I'm speaking on stage at convention. It didn't say that
That's
I was
yeah.
giving a 20-minute presentation about X, Y, and Z. It just said, I am speaking on stage at convention. I
Yeah.
spoke on stage at convention.
Yeah. No, a long time ago, I was in a goal setting workshop and somebody did say, they said, be very specific with what you say that you want. And and they gave an example like that, that was like, I want to be together with my family can be a lot of things, can be a wonderful family barbecue, could be a funeral, may want to be specific in what you say. So,
Yeah. And I use that same technique to manifest this house that I'm living in. Is it exactly the house I wanted? No. But did it meet the criteria of my I am statement? Yes. So I have to be a little bit more
there you go.
specific next time.
You know, Jack Canfield, the
Oh,
motivational
yes.
guy,
Yes, Jack
and he has that
Canfield
story about his.
started me on this journey. Yes.
Okay, so and he has. Have you ever heard him tell the story of the house in Hawaii, where he was giving an example of an I am statement, and his example was, I'm not going to get this exactly right, but it's I am sitting on my porch watching the Pacific sunrise in my house in Hawaii, right? And he did that as an example until one day he was like, oh my God, I am sitting in my house in Hawaii. This is the thing that I was talking about for like 5 years in these workshops. And I made it. I didn't even realize it, and I was doing it.
I love that story. I actually he I went to a Jack Canfield live event and he the circumstances to get you there. And I've told this story on the podcast before. So audience, you're going to have to hear it again. Um so my friend Kim and I get there and there it was a circular stage and everybody was in the middle and no one was sitting on the sides. And I said, "Let's go sit in the front row on the side." So we went and sat in the front row on the side. And he asked for a volunteer from the audience. And because I was the person closest to the stairs, I'm the person that he called up on the stairs, up on the
Ooh.
stage. And then he said, "Okay, pretend you're a statue." So I struck a pose because that's who I am. I strike poses. And I struck a pose. And then after the event, a man walked up to me and said, "I took a fantastic photo of you on stage with Jack. And would you like me to send it to you? What's your email address?" So he emailed me the picture. And then like 3 or 4 years later, I sent that photo to Jack Canfield and said, "Thank you for that night changed my life because it changed how I thought about things." And
Right.
he wrote I don't have it on my wall anymore, but I had it on my wall. He sent me back a handwritten note and he, "Thank you for sharing that memory with me, yada, yada, yada." And it was just, and I tell this Jack Canfield story all the time. And then I set this intention for myself in January of 2020. I said, I shared the stage with Jack Canfield once. I'm going to speak on stage with Jack Canfield. I am speaking on stage with Jack Canfield. In March of 2020, 3 months later, I had the 3 p.m. speaking spot at a virtual summit, and Jack Canfield had the 4 p.m. speaking spot at a virtual summit.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so
So,
cool. That
the
is so
book
cool.
is The Success Principles by Jack Canfield, and I promise you, if you read that book, listener, it will change your life.
And I agree with that. And I will also say that if there are any listeners who are like not maybe into the whole, self-help, kind of thing, when I picked up that book, I kind of had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, because like he's written a gazillion books. And I was like, I'm probably not going to like this. And da 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 da. And the whole way through, I was like, well, poo, I love this. Like, and then I had to then I
Well,
had to
and
sort
it's
of
not
reset and I read it again and I loved it.
the
Like,
thing
it's just
about
it because yeah,
the thing about the success principles is it's the secret, but it's pragmatic. It's
yeah,
not metaphysical. It's action
yeah,
oriented. So it's the secret for those of us who don't want the metaphysical thing that you get from the secret type,
right,
quote
right.
unquote. I'm air quoting why I say the secret, because it really is. It's the handbook that goes along with the idea of the law of attraction, but it's
And
the
it is,
action.
a little bit folksy and real genuine and easy to read and heartwarming and all the things that we expect from Jackie Canfield. And
Exactly.
I was very surprised by how much I enjoyed it. But exactly like you're saying, it's not wooey gooey. It's like it's a lot of common sense and go ahead and try it. And the manifesting and the secret, right? Like there's a part of it where it's like, well, yeah, you want to manifest some clients, market, right? You want to make some sales, You can manifest that by, creating a product and asking somebody to buy it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Get really good at asking. Yeah. Oh,
Right.
that's hilarious. Okay, so we've talked about your favorite way to market. We've talked about what it was like to launch during the pandemic. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, we've had such a great conversation. I feel like we talked about many random things in this conversation. I'm excited to listen back to it, see if I can follow the thread in the replay. It made so much sense as we were doing it.
Giving birth.
Yeah.
You gave birth to a business, and we talked
And then
about
we
giving
talked about
birth.
birth.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's good. And
Yeah.
we talked about, yeah. Okay.
And all
Very
the
good.
things that go along with giving birth are,
Yeah.
giving birth to a child and giving birth to a business are about the same. And really, if you don't let your business incubate for a little bit before you give birth to it, you might be doing yourself a disservice by not making sure that you've let the idea fully grow. But then sometimes I'm
Yes.
like all for, like I tell people sometimes it's better to ready, fire, aim,
Yes. Sometimes
because
it is. Yeah.
in archery, when you unless you are like a world-class archer, which I'm not, but in archery you have to pull back and release the arrow to make sure that your aim is correct, and then you have to
Yeah.
adjust, and you keep adjusting your aim until you get it right, and it's little tiny incremental adjustments in your aim until you hit the target where you want to hit it. um,
Yeah.
and so yeah, with archery it's ready, fire, aim. So with a lot of things it's ready, fire, aim, but
Yes.
sometimes you have to incubate.
Yeah, because once it's out, and yeah, it's both sides of that. I mean, and it's hard to know what it is, but in my experience, like I can think that something is super clear and wonderful and obvious. And then when I put it out into the world, people will say, oh, we don't understand what you're talking about.
I've
And that's
just
actually very helpful feedback because then I can come back and say, okay, that's true. Good to know. Try it
I,
again.
I decided to call this episode Birthing a Business.
There we go. There we
Step
go.
Parent Coach explains birthing a business. There's the title.
Very
There's the
good.
YouTube. There's the title of the YouTube video.
Very good. I love it. I love it.
All right, this is a favorite part of my episode. This is my favorite part of the episode. It's your moment of gratitude. For whom or what are you most grateful?
So my kids actually tease me about this. My stepkids and my kids actually tease me about this. But every day when I wake up, sometimes not when I first wake up, sometimes when I'm out on my walk, I take a really big, deep breath. And I'm very grateful to be able to do that. I had a good friend, family friend, that died after getting a lung infection and two lung transplants that both failed. And then she died. But she was real sick for a long time. And it was this like real struggle for breathing, which this is a sad story, but I have always been, happy for the health of my body. And I'd like to run and do all these things. And the act of breathing is something I take for granted all the time. I mean, I don't even know how many hundreds, thousands of times a day we breathe. Once a day, I take a big, deep breath. I'm just getting over a respiratory infection. So that's especially true, right? It's like take that big, deep breath and just be thankful that I'm able to do that. And all the miracles that happen with that. That's my moment of gratitude every day.
Thanks for tuning in to Gratitude Geek, where we help DIY marketers attract raving fans and repeat buyers. Don't forget to check out the show notes at gratitudegeek.com for links to all the resources mentioned in this episode. If you enjoyed it, please leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Our theme music is by Rev Brock and Solely. I'm Kandas Rodarte, reminding you that gratitude is like manure. It's just a pile of poo until you spread it around. Stay groovy, my friends.
Stay groovy, my friends.